Kate Brunette, Futurewise Development Manager, and we are keeping up with our weekly dispatches. And this week we are talking with our Livable Communities program. So maybe you two can introduce yourselves and give us a brief overview of what the Livable Communities program does.
Sure, I'll start. I'm Tiernan Martin. I'm the Livable Communities Program Manager, and I started working at Futurewise back in 2015, so been here for a little bit. When I started, I was really interested in finding a job where I could use my data analysis and mapping skills to support the community planning work of place-based organizations, and Futurewise was a great organization to do that. But over time, my role has expanded, beyond the data and mapping stuff to include project management. And a lot of the projects we do involve community engagement processes around new public projects, policies, and plans. So today, I manage the Livable Communities team, and we work on a whole lot of different types of projects that we can describe a little later on in the video.
Great.
Yeah, well, hello, my name is Cameron Steinback. I am the Livable Communities Coordinator, and I started with Futurewise in October of 2019 as the Antioch Graduate Fellow. Some of my passions and interests with being an environmental educator and then coming to Futurewise was really to get into the policy side of things, to get into the community engagement, really passionate and learning about environmental justice, different kinds of equity practices at all levels of civil society that improves individual and community well-being. So it's really exciting being with Futurewise with the education background and combining that with the kind of policy and advocacy work at the community level.
Awesome. Well, how about we dive into some of your more specific projects? Can you give us an overview? We'll dive into a little bit later how we're kind of adapting our work, but I think it'd be good for people to know what we have been working on for a while pre-COVID.
Yeah, and I think it's important to sort of characterize what types of projects we work on, because Futurewise does so much work. But the Livable Communities program is really focused on projects in general. Like we do project-based work. We also always work with partners, so our projects are partner-centered. And we usually look for project ideas that have some sort of impact on systems. So we tend not to take on sort of scopes of work that would only impact like one community or one specific place. We look for projects that do that, but also have implications for the policies or the plans or the law that could, so that our work can ripple out and impact more than one community.
So would it be fair to say these are project-specific work with an eye toward a bigger system or structure that can be changed through that project?
Yeah. I'd say that's a great way of summing it up.
Great.
Yeah, and I feel like another really big part of Livable Communities is that community engagement work, where we really take a goal-oriented approach where we can have really purposeful action with the communities to reach the objectives of the project. But also that are aligned with the community's desired outcomes. And we try to take really intentional steps to learn about the community, to address what is the problem, what are the issues that are going on, and how can we actually make a meaningful contribution towards their action and participation in those kind of things. So it's really about relationship building. It's about facilitating and coordinating different kinds of communication amongst all members of the community, from the community level to non-governmental organizations to parts of the government that we may be working with on a particular project.
Great. Well, should we talk about what some of those projects are?
Yeah. So one of the projects we're doing is a stormwater infrastructure planning project out on the Olympic Peninsula. It's called Green Link Port Angeles, and it is a project that specifically looks at the creek corridors that run through the city of Port Angeles, and engages the city and their staff, a group of local experts who work out there on the peninsula, and then just members of the general Port Angeles community and asked them to sort of envision what a network of green stormwater infrastructure projects that are built along the creek corridors would look like, and really sort of ask them what their priorities are for if this type of public infrastructure is built, how can it achieve stormwater goals, but also improve the habitat for local wildlife? How could it provide sort of social benefits by, increasing the amount of recreational space that Port Angeles and its visitors have available to them. And so we're really hoping to, design a whole list of prioritized projects and then work with our stakeholder group out there to identify which of them should be pushed farther to the next step, which is to get funding for them and eventually build and implement the projects.
Great.
Yeah, a few other projects working on down in South King County. One of them is a public participation grant from the Department of Ecology that's focused on outreach and engagement around a Boeing Auburn fabrication site where a groundwater contamination took place several years ago. So according to the Model Toxics Control Act, there's lots of engagement and information sharing with the community that goes through this entire process. So Futurewise has been a part of that for several years, and big parts of that are informing residents of that contamination and the cleanup process and how they can actively engage in it throughout, as well as consulting and collaborating with partners at the Department of Ecology to facilitate that public engagement and provide feedback from the community that we are gathering throughout that process as well. So being a really supportive partner with that community throughout the entire process. Another different project working on, but also in the same areas of Algona, is some wetland stewardship that we're doing with the King County Wastewater Treatment Division. It's a grant that's promoting this wetland stewardship. The city there has this parcel of wetland that they're really determined and focused to preserving for the community benefit there. So we're doing some community outreach, some education about the local wetland, starting at the elementary school level and blowing that up to larger community stewardship projects and facilitating community involvement and input in that whole process. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Great. That sounds awesome. Any other projects you want to highlight before we talk about how we're adjusting?
We have a bunch of other projects that are still in the planning stage. So, but I think it's better to just focus on the ones where we've already been engaging and now we need to sort of adapt our plans on the fly.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great transition. So part of the reason, we're doing some of these dispatches is to talk through, how do we do our work in a very, very different environment than we've all been accustomed to. And, I'm sure I'm not speaking just for myself when we are all making adjustments personally and professionally to a new reality in which our physical space and movement has been very restricted. Has a negative connotation. We are choosing to give each other space for the health of our community, but that certainly presents a new framework to work in when, like you said up front, a lot of our work is around community engagement and participation. So I'm curious, I know that we're still in the early stages and so we are certainly all learning as we go, but is there anything you want to share about how this work is being adapted to the new reality as we have it?
Yeah, definitely. The current standard of work and some of the community engagement practices are disrupted during this time, as many things in parts of our lives are, as you said, and as everyone who's out there knows. So those disruptions of going to people's doors, going to community events, are not accessible for the time being, and with that. With this situation, we've had a really great opportunity to reevaluate our practices, things we were doing before the shutdown, thinking about, planning in general, having a history of, excluding marginalized groups, and then systems being created that continue to perpetuate those disparities. It's really important in our previous work, but even especially now we're switching to some different engagement strategies. So we're really considering those gaps and how they may have gotten wider for certain populations, and thinking about strategies that are going to be really effective in reaching everyone in the community so they can be actively and appropriately engaged in these projects. And also given the context that we're all trying to deal with.
And so just to kind of put that in context, what I hear you saying is, we've known that planning as a profession has not always either unintentionally or intentionally has excluded communities, especially, Black and Brown communities, from participation and engagement around how we build plan our lived environment. And so, it sounds like what you're saying is we want to be really sensitive as we're in a very different, we're facing new constraints that we really hope to not perpetuate we don't want to perpetuate those same exclusionary practices. So we're having to get creative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, prior to COVID-19, Futurewise was always trying to apply a racial equity lens to a lot of our different type of work, but specifically the community engagement work for those reasons that Cameron just mentioned. And that some of those strategies are still going to apply to the work that we do now. We're still going to be looking to build accountable partnerships with the people from the communities that we're trying to engage, because they understand the problems that they face best and are going to be sort of closest to the eventual solution. So that still applies. We're still going to look to make sure that we're setting up, two-way communication channels so that we're not just having local governments or planners or whoever speak at community, but that there's really a chance for the sort of dialogue and collaboration and sort of changing of the positions that people come to a community engagement event with. And we still are going to be prioritizing the engagement of some of those historically marginalized groups and currently marginalized groups, and looking to dedicate, project funding to make sure that we can break down those barriers that they face, whether they're economic or linguistic or logistical or whatever. But there's some things that just don't work anymore. We in the past have really tried to go where people are at, where they currently congregate and get together, rather than like always asking them to come to the events that we design. And that doesn't work as well when people are trying their best to stay home. And so we've sort of started to explore some of the adaptations that we're going to have to make.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of those adaptations that we're preparing for and looking and getting really excited about are, of course, some of the things that are enabled through this visual conferencing that's going on. So, preparing recorded videos, talking with some community partners about collaborating on some live videos. Really thinking about that, as Tiernan said, that two-way communication that we can have with the communities, because that's what it's really all about. We're not just down there to share information. We're there to really facilitate a conversation so all community members can be active in that. But even with virtual engagement, there's folks, communities that have significant barriers to those kind of things. So we're really fortunate that there are a lot of community engagement practitioners that have been doing this work and sharing their work, sharing their resources and how we do this process equitably. And we're excited to take those steps, record and look at everything that we're doing. How are we achieving our goals? Are we remaining accountable to our mission and our goals and the projects that we've laid out? Are we remaining accountable to the community? And then sharing that information. So definitely, we're glad at the end of this video, as it's online, hopefully there'll be links to some of the things that we've been able to learn and be inspired by, and sharing those with other folks, other communities, other community engagement practitioners, to make sure that equitable engagement happens across the board. So I'm really excited to get into those spaces and start engaging the community with these different techniques. As an educator, it's exciting. I've had some of these experiences before, and it's really exciting to be able to apply them in this setting, in this place, particularly as the need is great. And then those are the kind of things we're really excited about.
Yeah, so we'll definitely make sure we've got a post together that has, some of these best practices, or even if they're not best, quote unquote, everything that people are trying. I'm curious, do you have any partners or organizations you feel like you're really learning from right now, or you think have some innovative ideas you're excited to try out?
Well, we've been sort of scouring the web and our contacts partners to see what we can come up with. I think that there is some really creative thought that's going out there right now in terms of how to address the problem, right, that we're facing. We sat in on a video panel discussion by members of the Untokening organization, and they just sort of had a very free-form discussion about what are the challenges that Black and Brown communities and communities of color in general are facing right now. And that was really insightful to just sort of hear people like express their own experience and what challenges they were facing. And they came up with a really good list of steps and sort of principles that planners should be abiding by and considering right now. So that's a really helpful resource. There's a really wonderful planning organization called Pueblo Planning, and their leaders have posted several blog posts that we should definitely share with folks watching this video that have really thoughtfully unpacked what some of these challenges are that communities face, some of their own research in terms of the digital divide, and some thoughts on how to incorporate more analog strategies into your engagement practice to overcome that barrier. And then we also came across a really great set of general equitable engagement principles that was created by a transportation planning firm called Nelson Nygaard. And it just really clearly and succinctly lays out the principles that their firm uses. And I think that could serve as an inspiration, both for the work that we do and for other folks out there who are engaging with communities right now.
Awesome. Yeah, it definitely seems like a time where we're all going to be learning from each other, and so it's great to hear that you two have been, proactive in trying to identify resources and places to learn, and that these lines of communication are open amongst planners and nonprofits and government around how to continue doing our work equitably in a time when we're all facing some pretty unprecedented challenges.
Yeah,
is there anything? Oh, go ahead, Cameron.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything you two want to add before we wrap up?
I think one of the sort of guiding lights that I'm trying to hold right now is just to stay flexible and adaptive, because I think it's unlikely that here at the Livable Communities program, we're going to figure it all out on our first try. One of the principles that was included in that list that I just mentioned by Nelson Nygaard was transparency and, forgiving mistakes and being honest when you make them. And I think that is going to be more important now than ever. If something that we're doing or some other planning firm is trying isn't working, now is not the time to get stuck in that. It's the time to really quickly change your course. And I'm thinking that that's going to be really important for us as we try different strategies and tactics to communicate with people and to breach that digital divide, and to really meaningfully bring in those folks who have been excluded from past planning processes or currently are excluded, to really just try everything that we can think of and to share what we learn as we do it.
Awesome. Karen, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, just the focus on relationship building and really leaning on community to get through these challenging times. For us as community engagement practitioners, we're learning and we're sharing resources. So building those relationships, building those resources, those common of common cause are just really important. And we're excited to be a part of those and listening to the community, what they need, and building out those resources so that we can really continue to have contact and engagement with folks who really need to be part of the process.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining me today. I think we'll wrap up there.
Thanks so much, Kate.
Thanks, Kate.